Welcome to Ghost Stories with Beauty Habitua. My name is Trina Anderson, and if this is your first time here, I tell ghost stories while I am doing my makeup. What's a little bit different about my ghost stories? I've actually talked to the people that have had these experiences, and I'm going to convey them to you in a story time format. This is something that you're interested in, I ask you to consider subscribing. You can hit the subscribe button there, or if your phone happens to be in landscape mode, turn it to portrait and you'll see it right down there below. You can go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell as well. A lot of times people convey a story, they're looking for acceptance from somebody who might understand. You don't have to believe in any of this though to enjoy the story. If you do feel that the ends are choppy sometimes, it's because I chopped them off. It's to protect the innocent. But I am going to try and wrap it up for you and give you the basics of the story and some of the details that you would only know if you happen to have been the person who did the interview. So the story is set in the Pacific Northwest, and they are about circa 1980. It's a family of 5. There's mom and dad and 3 children. There's an older daughter, a middle daughter, and a younger son. And the youngest son is 6, the middle daughter is about 10, and the oldest daughter is about 12 years old. The dad is a white-collar professional, and so is the mother. At this point in time, they have moved to a home that has a lot of property on it. They have some horses and cows and goats and barnyard animals. They also have a cat and a couple of dogs. And the cat and couple of dogs are kind of key in this story because that's one of the things that tipped them off that something wasn't quite right. It's a beautiful home. It was built around the turn of the century. It's like a modernized old family farm style home. And they absolutely love it. They really feel like they have hit the jackpot with this particular house. It's everything that they were hoping that it would be. And it has 2 bedrooms upstairs. It has a bedroom downstairs, and it has a mudroom off of the kitchen. If you're not from the northern states, you may not know what a mudroom is, but a mudroom is a room off of or a side entry to the house. It has a separation door so that generally if you're wet and you're cold, you're going to take off your galoshes, your heavy coat, and you're going to hang them up to dry so that when you enter the house, you are dry. It's got quite a bit of acreage around it. There's some barns off to the side. They have now moved in, and they notice right off the bat that Dad, he really wanted this house. I mean, like, he wanted to move in and take this house, and he just thought it was perfect. And it was a long way away from where they had been living before. So it wasn't something, I mean, this was a total uproot of the family to move to this area and do this, but he was just bent on this house. That was the place he had to be. Really sold everybody on the idea of this old house. And the kids were very excited. I mean, the kids are young. It was an adventure. And so they didn't have any real issues with it, except that they would miss their friends, you know, like any child would, obviously. So they move into the house, and almost immediately they notice that their dad is telling them that he feels a really weird energy in the house, that it feels like there's something amiss in the house, that it's not a happy energy. And this kind of got their attention. It was like, okay, Dad's now talking about happy energies in the house. But, you know, he's really made a point to say, now that I'm here, there's really something not feeling real right in here. But it was more of like a passing conversation. It wasn't one of these things where he was like, wow, you know, there's something wrong with this house. It wasn't like that. But it was noted by the older daughter and the middle daughter that he said something like that. I mean, it was just kind of like, okay, well, don't know what that is. So they just kind of chalked it up as, okay, there's an energy, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean. He didn't really talk about it being like a ghost or anything. And quite frankly, the kids kind of chalked it up to just being, you know, like maybe the electricity or something like that. I mean, they really didn't give it a whole heck of a lot of extra thought. So anyway, they noticed that Dad, who's always been very, very fun-loving, he was always the fun parent. Mom was much more serious. She just didn't have that, yay, hoorah kind of attitude. But the dad always did. He was the one that was always playing with the kids and roughhousing and, just having a good time playing with them. And roughhousing was a big deal in their family. He wanted his children, because his first two kids were women or young women, he wanted them to be able to protect themselves. So he would teach them safety moves, in case they were ever attacked or somebody tried to abduct them. So when they were talking about roughhousing, it was usually in the context that he was teaching them how to protect themselves. And he was very, very proactive about it. He would do things like have fire drills in the house to make sure that everybody knew how to get out of the house safely. He was really big on being the dad. So, and that's the really important part, because the kids were very accustomed to dad being very much a part of that. Mom was never a part of that. Mom was one that always just kind of sat off to the sides and was like, okay, yeah, you kids, you guys do you. And she tended to the house, that kind of thing. The kids noticed that he started doing things that were kind of peculiar, like suddenly and without warning, he started saying that the animals were no longer allowed in the house. Well, they had had their animals for a really long time. They'd had a dog and a cat for a long time, and they were actually gotten by the dad. He had come across the puppy and brought the puppy home, and now the puppy is much older, and he's always been around the house. And then he found the cat, had brought the cat home, and really, really loved the animals. He was the one that was always like, yeah, we've got to go get horses and cows and all kinds of stuff like that. So that he was the person who just loved being around the animals all of the time, and very, very caring for him. I mean, he'd even found a cat on the side of the road that had been hit by a car, took the cat to the vet and adopted the cat afterwards. So he was really, really a big animal lover. But suddenly, now animals were not allowed in the house, and for no real reason ever given. He would say things like, they have fleas. Well, in that neck of the wood, fleas can be very commonplace, and it's probably their bane, as opposed to maybe down here in the South where we deal with a lot of mosquitoes. But he would say, no, they've got fleas, but that'd never been an issue for them before. They've never had a flea infestation or anything like that. So the kids thought that this was really, really weird. Cats and dogs were not allowed in the house, and to begin with, that wasn't really an issue because it wasn't cold outside. So they didn't really care. But then when it became winter time and it started to get really cold, well, of course, the family thought that it was okay now to bring the animals inside. I mean, after all, it's really cold. Why would you put them outside? But with that, he got more and more and more excited about the fact that they were not allowed inside of the house. He also decided at the same time that at the front part of the house would never be heated. The rooms are always cold and he can never get them heated, and therefore he is going to no longer heat the rooms altogether. So to prevent the heat from going to the front part of the house, he cordoned off the front part of the house with a great big heavy blanket in the hallway and stopped heating the rest of the house. They said that they thought that maybe he was doing it to conserve on the bills and stuff, but it was just really out of the ordinary for him to do that suddenly. And at the same time say that the rooms felt weird. About this time, the dad has decided he's going to take everybody fishing. He takes the daughter, the son, both daughters and the son to a fishing hole, and they are all about the fishing that day. He seemed like everything was, having a good time, but the end of the night comes as they're packing up and walking back to their vehicle. The younger daughter, the middle daughter, she's kind of off to the side. She doesn't really have anything in her hands, but she's walking in between. And she said she was about 6 or 7 feet behind her brother and sister, and her dad was somewhere behind them, when suddenly she heard a noise that really, really disturbed her, because this noise wasn't like anything she'd ever heard before. In this particular case, she heard a laugh. It was what she described as being sinister. And it was so out of context and so strange to her that this laugh occurred that she actually turned around to hear where it came from. It being her father was not the first thing that she thought about. It was, it was really foreign. She'd never heard anything like this at all. And she turns around, and what she sees is her dad staring at her. And he's kind of got his head tucked down towards his chest, and he's looking at her through his eyebrows. And she said his expression was very, very different than any other way he'd ever looked at her before. And she looked at him, and he's smiling at her. And she said that the smile, everything about it was totally different. It wasn't like her friendly dad that she'd always known up to that point, and coupled with this really weird laugh that he'd had out of context. He wasn't talking to anybody or anything like that. He's just walking behind her, she said. And she said that the laugh was the kind of laugh that's almost diabolical, almost corny in the way that it was done. If you compare it to like today's, it's almost cliche. But she said it was seriously like that. And when she turned around and saw the expression on her face, she said that the only thing that she could do was know she needed to get away from him, that something wasn't right suddenly at that moment. And she ran up to her brother and sister. But she never said anything to him because she thought that they were going to think she was acting weird. Dad just made a weird sound. So what is she supposed to say? Hey, Dad just made a weird sound, and I'm scared of Dad at that moment. So she didn't say anything to him or to the brother and sister at all about what she had just heard their dad do. They get into the car and they drive home, and she's very on edge and like something's not right in the state of Denmark. Well, during this period of time, the older daughter, she had decided, I don't like this whole thing that our dad is suddenly doing, because when he cut off the rest of the house from being heated, it also cut off the heat in their upstairs bedroom. There wasn't any additional heat or radiant heat, she said, going upstairs. So without that, in the middle of the winter, it was extraordinarily cold. So anyway, the oldest daughter, she decides she's just not down with Dad's idea of huddle the masses kind of thing. And so she decides she's going to start sleeping upstairs, and she starts stockpiling all the blankets that she can find so she can go and stay in her room. And when she gets up to the room, and she's got, all of her little kid things that little kids have got. One day she's up there listening to her albums, and her mom calls her down and says that dinner is ready. So she was really, really particular about caring for her albums. She painstakingly turned off the album, and to do that, she took the needle off of the album, put it away onto its little holder, and then turned it off. Now remember, this is a record player, not a stereo, not an automated system. So that was one of the things that was really, really stressed to me, is that this is not an automated system. Some of them were a little bit more fancy, and you could turn it on and it would lift up the needle and drag it over and set it down for you. And that was pretty nifty back then. But hers was just a little record player, so you have to do all that stuff manually. So she goes downstairs and she has supper with the family, and then she decides, well, you know what, I'm going back upstairs. Then she ventures back to the stairwell, and when she gets to the base of the stairs, she hears music playing. And she thought, well, her sister must have gotten up there and was now messing with her albums, and that made her really mad. So she thought, how did she beat her there? She was just really confused. She said that her brain just kind of short-circuited a little bit. She couldn't really think as to why she was hearing the music upstairs. So she walks upstairs, now mad, thinking that it's one of her siblings, and she opens up the door, and there is nobody in the room. And what she finds is down on the floor where her record player was at, the needle is now finishing the last song, and it's just spinning around the paper. This freaked her out so badly, she went running downstairs to find out where her siblings were at, because she was like, what the hey? So she goes down and she locates both her brother and her sister, and now she is just like, that was it. That was upsetting. And she tells her mom what has happened. And her mom kind of discounts it. She's like, oh, yeah, whatever, stupid stories that kids tell. But the dad, he doesn't. He doesn't discount it at all. And he proceeds to tell her, well, and there's a negative energy in the house. And maybe it just liked your albums. And she thought that that was kind of strange. Why would he be saying that he liked the albums? Since when does negative energy like an album? I mean, there's lots of little things that a teenager or preteen thinks, and she's like, whatever, Dad. So she now is a little sketched out. There's negative energy talk, and her dad has, now mentioned this twice, and he is insisting that pretty much everybody should stay in this part of the house where he is at. But she, like I said, she doesn't want to do that. She decides, you know what, I'm not going to be scared away from where it is. I'm not sleeping downstairs with everybody else. She's going back upstairs, and she's just going to stay up there and go to sleep anyway. One of the things when they were really little that her mom and dad would always do is if the kids went to bed before the parents, after they were all in bed and settled down, the mom and dad would go up to their rooms and they would check on the kids, make sure everybody was tucked in, say goodnight, give them a hug and kiss if they weren't already asleep, kind of thing. And this was kind of like a ritual for them that they did for a really long time. And then as the kids got older, it didn't happen as much. It was something that would happen intermittently. The oldest daughter always felt like the dad was doing it to make sure nobody sneaked out of the house. I don't know why anybody would sneak out of the house that young, but I mean, I guess it's possible. On this day, she's laying there in bed and she clearly hears them coming up the stairs. She said the door is at the foot of her bed and the door is cracked open about enough to stick 2 fingers through. She's waiting for them to come in. She can't see through the crack in the door because of where her bed is at, but the door is cracked. She waits for them to make it to the top of the stairs because she can hear them coming up the stairs. And like I said, it wasn't unusual. They always came up together. So that wasn't an unusual sound for her to hear somebody coming up. She waits because she hears it come all the way to the top of the stairwell and she doesn't see anything. And so she thought that was really strange because she clearly heard it come all the way up and how the sound even changed as it comes up the stairwell. While she's waiting for them to come in, she realizes, okay, this has been a really long time. So she decides to find out where they're at. Maybe they're standing there in the hallway. And so she gets up to the edge of her bed and she opens up the door and she sees nothing. But what she gets is this really weird sensation instead. She was more confused when she opened up the door than she was scared. But then the sensation hit her a few seconds later and that terrified her. She said she doesn't remember hitting any of the stairs all the way down. She's screaming all the way through the house and into the bedroom, and that is where she finds her mom, her dad, her sister, and her brother are all in the parents' bedroom. The kids are laying down on the floor, and mom and dad are actually in bed. There's no sign that they had been out of bed at all. She is so terrified by this, she decides she's not sleeping up there maybe ever again. She is now staying in the bedroom, sleeping on the floor in her parents' room. During this period of time, that's when he'd gotten really weird with the animals. And so the younger daughter had been sneaking the cat inside of the house, and the mom had been keeping the cat and the dog inside of the mudroom so that they could stay out of the cold. And I mean, nobody's in the mudroom. It's not necessarily heated, but you're at least out of the elements and you're not in the wind. And there was no shelter for these animals outside except for the barn, and the dogs would not, and the cat would not stay in the barn for whatever reason. They wouldn't do that. So at the same time that all of this is going on, the younger sister has felt a little bit inspired and a little ballsy and has decided that she too wants to sleep upstairs as well. Now, on that particular night that I just told you about what happened with the older sister, the next portion of this actually happened somewhere around that same time frame. And the younger sister is up there in her room. I think the way it was described, she was going to try and sleep up there herself. And she wanted to sneak the cat inside of the house. And she knew that she couldn't do that if she was staying down there in the bedroom with her mom and dad. So she decides that she's going to go up to her room and sleep in her room. I mean, after all, the older sister had done it. So there's kind of like, some cover. So the younger sister, being 10 years old, she was pretty on top of that. Sneaks the cat up there. On cue, up comes Daddy, and she hears him coming up the stairs. And she's panicked. She's like, oh my God, I've got the cat. So she proceeds to take the cat, put the cat inside of her closet, hops back into the bed. Her dad walks inside and he's having a conversation with her. He's being very normal, so to speak. And he's just about to walk out the door when the cat, who was actually fairly fond, I guess, of the dad because he was the person who'd actually rescued him even, hears his voice and comes out of the closet to go greet the father. Apparently that was a bad idea on the cat's part because this absolutely set the dad off. And here's the thing. It didn't make him mad. He didn't get enraged. What he did, according to her, was just turn into this very sadistic personality. And he picks up the cat by the scruff of the neck and he proceeds to open up the window and threw the cat out the second-story window. And since it was dark and it was cold at night, he basically is telling her that the cat got what she deserved because she was breaking the rules by letting the cat inside of the house, that it was her fault that that had happened to the cat. And he walks off callously like it's no big deal. Something very foreign to the dad that she had known. I mean, he'd always been very, very loving and affectionate. The daughter comes down, tells the mom, and the dad's only expression and response pretty much is, it's a damn cat, it'll land on its feet. It was very, very distressing even for the mom for the way that he was behaving over this, but she kind of just fell in line, she said, and didn't really give too much of an argument, which the daughter thought was strange. The older daughter, who's now privy to this, thought that that was strange as well. But, this isn't a time when you didn't go and talk back to your parents and not expect to get, your mouth slapped. That was not an out of the line kind of thing. You don't hear about that so much anymore, but my God, back then, say something and standing in the kitchen, you might pick your ass up out of the dining room. It was just, that's the way parenting was done. And certainly in this household, it was done like that. The kids are now seeing that the dad is being particularly vicious and vindictive when it comes to the animals being in the house. And the mom, who has been keeping the animals, the dogs, out on the mudroom, the dad goes out on a different occasion and he's walking through the mudroom and in the morning time, and he sees that the animals are on the mudroom. He proceeds to kick the puppy, just kicked him as hard as he could out of the mudroom. And this really freaked the kids out. I mean, they were like, what the heck? But mom's still really calm. She's really not doing a whole heck of a lot about anything, maybe rolling her eyes at it, but inordinately calm. And the kids are just, they're sad. They don't know what the hell's going on with dad or why he's always in this weird state, because he's not necessarily always in a bad mood. So they were very, very adamant to point out that this isn't a man in a bad mood who's having a bad day at work and coming home and drinking or anything like that. Just didn't happen. He wasn't this person who wasn't completely and utterly normal up until these moments when all of a sudden he started doing these really strange behaviors. The next thing that happens, they had gotten a load of hay from the local hay farm. It starts raining really badly. It's talked about between the mom and the dad that they've got to do something because the roof is leaking on the barn a lot more than they realized. And so in this conversation, the mom says, well, you know what, why don't you and the oldest daughter, go out to the barn and take all of the 5-gallon buckets, I guess, that they had someplace, and go and see if you can catch the water. And while you guys are off doing that, I'll go get you some ice cream as a reward for all the work you're doing. Now, I'm sure that that is the little bits and pieces that the daughter picked out of the conversation, you know, mom and dad discussing this. Who knows how the actual context of the conversation went? So let me reiterate that we're not sitting there like flies on the wall. She agrees to go up with her dad and find all of the holes and move the bales of hay. They're now up on the second loft, and they are looking for where the holes are coming through on the roof. They've moved all of these bales of hay and stacked it all up. And she says she looks over and she hears her dad make a comment, a weird comment. And she can't remember what the comment was. Said that she's tried most of her life to remember what that comment was, but it was enough that it stopped her in her tracks. And she was like, that's not right. And this really alarmed her because suddenly things didn't feel right to her. She looked over and she sees him, and he's on the opposite side of this little tower of hay. He's to the back of it, and she's about 10 to 15 feet away from the ladder that goes down the side of the barn into the troughs that are down below. So I guess you feed him, you dump it over, and the hay would land down into the trough. So she thinks to herself that something's not right and she needs to play it really cool. I don't know why people think they have to do that, but that's what she thought. And so she proceeds to laugh at his comment, even though that it's made her feel really uncomfortable. She's decided to laugh at it and kind of ha 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 ha. But she said she knew that that didn't get her very far, because when she looked back over, he's now standing on the same side of the bales of hay that she's on, and she sees him look at her in a very particular way with his chin down, and he's looking through his eyes. He's smiling at her. And the way she describes it is he's looking very sinister to her. Any idea that she was safe is now gone. It's out the window. She is not safe. And she feels very, very threatened. And she looks out the barn door, the loft doors, she said. And she was deciding whether or not she wanted to jump out of the loft doors. But for whatever reason, she says she still doesn't know to this day, she chose to make a run for the ladder instead. So she runs to the ladder and is trying to climb down and makes it about half the way down. She said about to the top of her chest is how fast she was able to get down the steps of the ladder. And she said that her father came after her, and like he was skidding into home plate, he skidded into her and straddled each side of her as he tries to pull her back up into the lofts up at the top. And he isn't saying anything to her, but he's making weird sounds, for lack of a better way of putting it. He doesn't say anything, and it's not moaning, so I don't want you guys to get that visual thing in your head, but he's making weird sounds. It's not anything she necessarily really gave a lot of thought of at the moment. It was more of those, what the heck is that? She's trying to get down, and a serious struggle ensues between her and her dad while she is essentially being pulled up from the ladder into the loft, and at one point finds herself basically suspended between the ladder and the loft floor. At some point in this struggle, uses to her advantage the way her dad had decided to sit to try and pull her up. As I said, he had straddled each side of her. And so she used that to her advantage, she said, and put a hurting on him. and apparently was successful because he let go and she was able to run out of the barn. She went through the mudroom and stood there for a second trying to figure out where she needed to go. And she said that what was very strange about this was that as she's going through the house, her tendency was to go to the bedroom, her bedroom. But in the process of making this decision to go to her bedroom, she was advised that was not a good idea. She would be trapped there, and it would be better if she got out of the house. So she decides, good idea. Not necessarily her good idea, but a good idea indeed. So she runs out the side of the house. She did look. She said that she looked to see if he was coming, and he had not left the barn at that point in time. But there was a place that she had where she would go and hang out. Tucked into these blackberry bushes, there was like kind of a concave area where she would sit sometimes. You couldn't see her from the house, and you couldn't see her from either side of these blackberry bushes. She goes in there and she sits down. She's really disturbed. She's looked around. She doesn't see anything. There's nobody watching her. She doesn't see her dad anywhere. And she's just like, what in the utter F just happened in my life? That's what's going on with Dad. And, you know, why was he acting like that? Dad doesn't do that kind of stuff. He's never acted that weird before. So she's really struggling with the weirdness of this whole thing. And she's also struggling with the fear, you know, of knowing that she knew she wasn't safe by the only man she's ever known to keep her safe. So she's really having a true mind screw at that moment. And like she said, she had looked and he wasn't anywhere around. He wouldn't have seen her necessarily go out the backside of the house, and she knew she had a good lead on him, you know, for that. So she said she's sitting there, and while she says that over the years time is definitely warped, like space is kind of warped in the whole sense of things, she said that it still bothers her to this day how fast he found her, because it wasn't a matter of looking or driving by or anything. And this is a place that she never talked to anybody about. Nobody knew that she would go there. That was her quiet place. She said that it had only been a matter of maybe 10 minutes. She said that it was so fast that it scared her even more, because it wasn't like he drove by looking. He literally drove up to it and opened up the car and told her, get in. She sat there petrified. She did not know how he found her. She looked behind her to see if there was any way he could have seen her go where she went. And she said there was no way for him to see from anywhere in the yard once she ducked back behind those bushes where she went. And he had obviously not walked up behind her. She would have heard him. This is her secret squirrel place, you know, that she didn't talk to anybody about this. Not even her sister knew about this place. Here he is, right there in front of it, telling her, basically, get your ass in the car. And like I said, this is circa 1980-81. You did what your damn parents told you, and you didn't question it. That's all there was to it. She obediently gets inside of the car, and she is about as plastered to the side of the car door as she could possibly get, she said. You remember, Mom and the kids, they're gone. They went to go get groceries and ice cream. That was the big reward for doing all of this stuff. So they're nowhere around. It's not like she could go run in and tell Mom. So as they start to drive away, and she is truly worried, they come across their mom. The mom is driving towards them as they're driving away. And she said she looked at her mom and saw her mom's face was a little perplexed, but you know, Mom wouldn't have known anything was out of the ordinary. But they stop and they roll down windows to talk. And the mom said, so where are you going? And the dad says, we're going to go get some ice cream. When she heard those words, she knew things were so wrong and so off that staying in that car was not a good idea. And she bailed hard. The daughter is not crying. She's not saying anything. She's probably in a state of shock. I mean, wouldn't you be in a state of shock? And the older daughter waits, and the mom knows something's up, because why would you go and get ice cream if you know that the whole reason going to the store was to go get ice cream? I mean, that was the discussion. She waits for the mom and then proceeds to tell the mom what had happened, some of the things that had been happening in the house and how weird things were, about how weird dad had gotten. And she's just like, Mom, you know, dad's doing all of this really weird stuff, and then this happened today, and this is how he was behaving. So the mom says, you know what, I'm going to go in and talk to your dad. In talking to the dad, the mom is told everything that the daughter said happened absolutely happened. That there was no inference that anything that the daughter had said that had been conveyed to the dad was inaccurate. He was like, that absolutely, all of that absolutely happened, that she's absolutely told you the truth, which was kind of weird. The dad's like, look, she got all spooked out inside of the barn, and it looked like she was going to slip. I dove down as fast as I could to catch her, and I tried to pull her up into the barn so that she wouldn't fall. She flipped out at me, and there was a huge struggle, and I don't know what her deal was, but that's what happened inside of the barn. And I was just trying to protect her. I wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary, but you know, she admittedly is going through a really tough time with the whole, you know, move over here. She doesn't have any friends or anything. And I certainly wasn't trying to do anything to her except to help her, because I thought she was going to fall. And, you know, that was the end result of it. I'm really sad about it. I found her. I wanted to talk to her about it. I wanted to go take her someplace, and we were going to go have some ice cream, just her and I. And, you know, that was the best I could do. And then you drove up and she got out of the car and ran in and talked to you. Well, Mom was like, yeah, okay, that's a good answer. Totally understand. It makes good sense. You know, she is a little bit touchy about stuff. And probably exactly what happened. I'll go talk to her. Everything will be fine. Came in, said, you know, I went and talked to your dad about it, and he feels terrible about what happened. You know, he was really trying to protect you, and, you know, you got to think about it. There's always two sides to every story. And, you know, in him doing this, he was just trying to be a father and make sure that you were okay. And he really wants to talk to you and, you know, talk it out. Now, the daughter isn't buying any of that shit at all, but her mom and her dad are what controls that house. And so she went back in there to work things out with her dad. So the daughter is kind of attributing that there's some things just not right overall in this entire thing. Apparently there were some other weird impressions they were given where they just knew something was off. Almost like somebody was really gleeful to be making them uncomfortable. So the mom is like, you know what, house is probably not for us, it's too big, blah, blah, blah. When they are told that they will be leaving this house and going someplace else, the kids are just like, yeah, let me out of here. They get to the new house and everything's fine. Dad isn't acting weird. Mom isn't acting weird. They have literally acted like living in this other house was a blip on the radar and went completely and thoroughly without notice. Actually started allowing them to keep the animals, the house animals inside of the house, and actually added to it by getting a new kitten. Not a single word ever breathed about whether or not they're allowed to be in the house at all. That's never mentioned again. They don't say anything about it. It's like it's always been that way. So it's not until years later that the two sisters are sitting there having a conversation one day when the younger sister tells the older sister about what had happened on the fishing trip. And from then on, they start comparing notes, stuff that they had never talked about before, and are like, oh, holy crap, what the hell happened to Dad and Mom in the house on the hill? So that is how this story ends, with two sisters making reconciliation and, trying to reason what has happened. They have mentioned this to the parents, and it was actually discussed with both of the parents, wanting to know, hey, guys, you got any insight as to when you guys lost your minds? And both parents have no recollection of any of the things that were talked about in the same manner that the girls do. And the parents were very nonchalant, very dismissive almost of the entire thing. And neither one of them felt that they were dismissive because they didn't want to talk about it. They felt like they were dismissive because they honestly couldn't, like they didn't see the whole thing the way that the kids did, and therefore it was dismissed in that way. It's like, yeah, kids talking, they've got weird conversations. So that's how that turned out for them. Never really any closure, just very certain. The house on the hill messed with their parents, in particular their dad, and they've gone their entire life with that, the majority of that being a secret from one another. That's got to have been their own private hell. So there you have it. If this was something that you enjoyed, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Please give me a thumbs up and let me know that you liked it. You can also leave comments down below. I'm looking for feedback. I am well aware of the fact that this is still kind of rough on the edges, but everything is a learning curve, and I intend to get better at it as I'm learning to translate somebody's actual story into a story for you guys. And with that, I will say to you, don't touch your face, don't pick your nose, and go wash your hands. Make it a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. I did want to add a footnote. I totally forgot, and I forgot to give credit to who was my inspiration for doing these videos. And that is Bailey Sarian, who does makeup and true crime. So if true crime is something that you are interested in, I will have a link to her channel down below. So a big thank you to Bailey Sarian, and I hope that you truly enjoy her channel and that you enjoy mine. I would really like it to be as good as hers someday, but in my own special way. All right, guys, make it a great day. Bye.